We saw during the past year when those executive orders were in effect, we saw many, many more people participating in government, watching meetings, participating, making use of public comment periods to do it remotely. And the fact that that can't happen now when we really should be staying at home for the most part, it really undermines the whole democratic process.
I'm Justin Silverman of the New England First Amendment Coalition. We're very pleased to announce that NEFAC has partnered with the ACLU School of Communications to offer free online classes in February on the First Amendment and public records law. So join me for an introduction to state FOI laws. We'll wrestle with conflicts between the public's right to know about government and other interests such as privacy and law enforcement. I'll also be teaching a class on common exceptions to our freedom of speech, such as incitement, libel, and obscenity. So check these classes out. More information about them, including registration links, can be found at nefac.org. I'm with Stephen Brown, Executive Director at the ACLU of Rhode Island. Thanks for joining us, Stephen.
Thank you, Justin.
Stephen, on behalf of the ACLU, NEFAC, and other members of Access Rhode Island, you sent a letter to Governor McKee today asking for certain executive orders to be reinstated that will help make government more accessible despite these recent COVID concerns. Before I get to that letter, can you first describe for us the current situation in Rhode Island when it comes to open meetings?
Sure. Right now, Rhode Island's open meetings law is what it is in the statutes. The way it usually works, all public bodies have to meet in person, and people can attend the meetings. For a period of over a year after COVID struck, there were a series of executive orders issued, first by our previous governor, Governor Raimondo, and now by Governor McKee, that created various exceptions to the statute, the open meeting statute. It allowed public bodies to meet remotely, and just as importantly, if not more importantly, it required that those meetings be live streamed, so members of the public could tune into them. And to the extent that people had the ability or authority to participate in the meetings, they were able to participate remotely as well. That was the way until June of this year. The governor felt that things had calmed down enough in terms of COVID transmission that things could go back to normal. And that's the way it went for a few months. Then in September, when the Delta variant came, Access Rhode Island, all the groups that have sent this most recent letter, asked the governor to reconsider and perhaps reinstate these executive orders that had been introduced in the past. He didn't do that. And so for the last few months, public bodies have been meeting in person. For the most part, people who want to attend those meetings or participate in those meetings have to physically be at the meeting place, although there are at least a few public bodies that have continued to do live streaming. Most have not, however. And it seems to us that in light of the incredible problems that the latest variant of COVID is causing, here in Rhode Island, according to the statistics, we are the worst state in the country in terms of the number of COVID cases we're now seeing. It just seems to us to be a public health hazard to be telling people that if they want to participate in their government, if they want to go to meetings, if they want to provide input at meetings, they have to physically attend them. There are a lot of controversial issues that public bodies are dealing with now. We're also having public bodies having millions of dollars of new federal funds. They have to decide what they're going to do with them. This is a time for the public to be able to participate vigorously in both monitoring and giving advice and guidance to public bodies. But there are many, many people who quite understandably are very concerned about physically going to a meeting with dozens or hundreds of other people to express their views. They are putting their health and potentially life at stake.
So if you could just again spell out for us what the danger is in the status quo right now, because you do have representatives, government officials are meeting in person. You do have some portion of the population there in person. What do we risk losing if we don't have some other arrangement in place that allows remote meetings or hybrid meetings to occur?
Sure. Well, there are two problems. One is a health problem. I mean, there are some people who are still willing to attend these meetings, but they are putting their health at risk, or if they're not concerned, they may be putting at risk the health of others who aren't there if they get COVID and transmit it to people who aren't there. For public government purposes, for open government purposes, the biggest concern is that people are not able to monitor what public bodies are doing unless they want to take this enormous risk of physically going to meetings. And as a result, public bodies are not having the oversight that they might otherwise have. Members of the public are not having the opportunities that they might otherwise have to provide input to these public bodies. We saw during the past year when those executive orders were in effect, we saw many, many more people participating in government, watching meetings, participating, making use of public comment periods to do it remotely. And the fact that that can't happen now when we really should be staying at home for the most part, really undermines the whole democratic process. It thrives on having public participation, but that can't happen if you have to weigh whether you want to get sick in order to participate.
So back to the letter that we sent today, what specifically are we asking the governor to do?
The letter actually makes a very simple request, and that is simply to reinstate the executive orders that had been issued for over a year. I think that almost everybody thought was a good idea at the time. And we're telling him, this is a time to bring them back. There's no excuse to continue with the way things are based on what we're seeing happening with COVID right now.
So we made a similar request in September, fell on deaf ears. Hopefully that won't happen again, but those listening to this conversation right now who want to help the effort, who want to have their voices heard and say, hey, this is a really good idea and we should have remote and hybrid meetings again, how can they best help the cause?
Well, I think there are a few things that people can do. One, they can contact the governor's office and express their opinion, express their support for the letter that's been sent by our groups urging the reinstatement of these earlier executive orders. You can contact your state legislators and ask them to put pressure on the governor as well. If nothing happens, we'll certainly be looking to the legislature to address it themselves if the governor won't. And just as importantly is talk to your local, municipal officials. As I mentioned, there are some in the state that have continued to do live streaming and allow remote public participation. If you're living in a community where that's not happening, you should be pressing your city council, your school committee to be doing that. If they still want to meet physically, which they have to do until another executive order is issued, they still have the ability and should exercise the ability to let the public participate remotely.
Great suggestions. Thank you, Stephen. Appreciate all your help here, and hopefully we'll get a response from the governor soon.
Let's hope. Thank you, Justin.